frame. I think I know probably most of you guys watching this video. And for those of you that might be new, I think there's a few new seniors and families this year. I'm looking forward to getting to spend this next year with you all. We have a lot to cover in this afternoon session, and just a couple housekeeping items before we kind of jump into the content. You'll see my face on and off the screen as we go through. I'll be transitioning to a PowerPoint that most of the time we'll probably be spending our time walking through. However, I did want to just kind of put a name to the face so that if you haven't seen me in the last couple years, because everything's been digital, that's probably why. And just a couple housekeeping notes. Number one is this is being recorded, so if you're jumping in late, if you're unable to make it at the live event, this will be recorded and available both on YouTube, so our North Tahoe High School YouTube channel, or on our North Tahoe High School Counseling Facebook page. So they're both being broadcast there, and that's pretty common that we'll do. In this time frame, we are going to be limiting this to just the online version, unfortunately. Later on this year, hopefully we'll be able to do a couple in-person events, but this provides the flexibility and just lets us play a little safer where we're able to, since much of this content can be easily delivered through a digital medium. So I'm looking forward to getting to spend some afternoon time with us. Like I said, we got a lot to cover. If you have questions, I'll kind of remind you guys of this as we go through, but feel free to reach out over email. There's a couple things that are coming up that are going to be good opportunities for questions and answers and that kind of stuff. I am monitoring the YouTube chat box as well here, so if you have questions, feel free to type anything in, and I'll be happy to try to answer those as best I can while we're going or at the very end. So hang tight. We're going to try to do this in an hour or less. Like I said, there's a lot of content, and we are going to cover a lot of different things, which I'll highlight here in just a second. If you wanted to follow along, I will post, after this is up, I will post the PDF of the presentation material itself in both the Facebook post and the YouTube link, which will then get emailed out to everybody as a follow-up. So just hang tight. If you don't need to write down a bunch of notes, if you see it on the screen, you'll get a copy of it. Yeah, so that's about it. We're going to jump back in. You might see me kind of flipping over here. I'm kind of playing my own director as well, so we'll kind of bounce back in, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the stuff that's upcoming. So as we look at our year and our path to a successful senior year, there's a lot of things that we really have to kind of keep in mind. And so a couple of things that I'm hoping and looking forward to doing with you are talking a little bit about what are some general senior year tips and tricks that will help make your senior year the most successful that it possibly can be. We'll touch a little bit on some of the social emotional elements, but the vast majority of our time today will be primarily academic and after high school items. And we'll talk briefly about a couple options, but I will give you fair warning right now that the vast majority of our conversation will be revolved around the world primarily of four-year college. And it's not to say that that nothing else matters and that we won't get to those other items, but this time frame of senior year generally has the most kind of oomph associated with that world and that application process. So we have to jump right in there. So I'll cover a little bit more about that later on. Dates and deadlines, some logistics of senior year, some of the things to really be aware of. Different resources that you have available to you throughout this upcoming year, and the different things that you kind of need to keep in mind. And then also kind of more specifics about, we talked about, and I would encourage you if you're on YouTube or on Facebook to go back to the junior pre-summer video that's up and available for you on the YouTube page, because that also has some good things if you're still in that pre-thinking phase. We're not going to spend as much time about like, hey, what am I looking for in the world of college, but more moving on to the active steps, which many of you guys, I'll tell you from, just kind of getting back into the roll of things this year, the class of 2022, you guys are on top of it. I've gotten a lot of requests already of stuff that I'm kind of like, well, hold on, we're just getting started with the school year. So don't panic, you guys. That's a big thing. I know that we're coming off basically 18 months of panic in our society. And so I want to kind of encourage you guys that it's a fast but slow process, okay? We'll detail that a little bit more closely as we move forward as well. So as we kind of move forward here, we're going to jump, and I'm going to kind of just briefly lay out some timelines for us. Okay, so that's just, that is something that I want to kind of make sure that we are spending some time on. And I've kind of put together this rough outline of some big important items that a senior year will encompass. All right, so at the top you kind of see a couple key flags. And so the first one that's coming up is actually coming up this coming Friday from the date of this recording, which is September 13th, which is a Monday. So September 17th is our add drop deadline. So that's an important date in that you want to have all of your classes set by that day. All right, so that's an important one that's coming up just less than a week from now. So if your classes aren't set, and this week in Pathways, like I said, we are a little bit delayed and kind of pushed back in terms of our year with the smoke days and stuff and the fire warnings and whatnot. So normally this would have been the week that you would have reviewed your transcripts, and then you would have had, I'm sorry, last week would have been a week that you would have reviewed transcripts. And so it is something that we want to make sure that you're going to get an opportunity in your Pathways classes this week to actually go through and get a printout of your high school transcript to date, and you're going to check it off against both college requirements and high school graduation requirements. Okay, we do this for a couple reasons. Number one is I want you to be involved in the process, students. I want you to have onus and skin in the game, but it also helps me triple check my own checks. All right. Every now and then people catch things that I don't catch for some reason. Staring at lots of transcripts, sometimes you can get kind of that transcript blindness. And so I need your eyes and hands and experience in your school, your school program so far to double check our work. All right, so you'll be doing that. The next one that's kind of a big one that's coming up is the FAFSA. Well, we won't spend a ton of time on financial aid. The FAFSA is all associated with financial aid. That's called the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. That opens up October 1st, all right? So that's kind of a magic start date. We will have an entire, so right around that time frame, so in another month or so, very close to October 1st, we'll be scheduling an entire session kind of like this one, just about financial aid, okay? It is complex. It is also very individualized. And so we will talk more about what are the processes, what are the things we need to look out for, what are the stuff that you need to have up as part of your plans. Okay, so that's a big deal. So that's one up to put on there. We have on the far right, we have AP exams, so just marking that date. Decision date would be kind of it's kind of become a little bit more gray area. They don't stick to the May 1st date in some circumstances anymore. We can talk about that individually, but generally that's a good target date, and many colleges do have that. And then graduation's on June 9th this year. So that's kind of a big picture look. And then if you see down below, there's some key items. I'm not going to read them all off to you. I've mentioned a few of them. Just making sure that you're maintaining your academic performance, and it kind of windows out the 2 semesters. You also have the CSU application submission window down there in the red, and that's the California state institutions. So on October 1st through November 30th, those are the windows when you can actually submit an application to any of the 23 CSUs. And then you have the UC application window, which has a much longer window of work, meaning it's already open for kind of filling out the application, but you can't actually submit the application until November 1st rolls around. Both of them are due November 30th. We'll speak more on that later. And just a rough outline of kind of where we're at in our process. So kind of August through, generally October, and end of October can be used for research. Many of you guys will do active steps as well. But this is still a prime time for research and planning. It is not necessarily bad to continue researching. You don't have to have all that done at this point of your senior year. The next phase is kind of that act or do. This is the big window of time when you're actually typically going to be submitting. Maybe you're doing some acting and doing before that happens, but this window, kind of November 1st through December 31st, is kind of when the vast majority of four-year colleges actually have their submission windows happening. We'll break that down too. And then follow through. This is one that's many times gets people in a little bit of a bind. The follow through element can cause a lot of problems for students. And so we'll break down some tips of how to avoid that, when the early spring comes around, because it's very easy to lose track of the process. There's lots to do even then. Most people focus only on the fall as their main to-do items. And then the junior college kind of window, we'll briefly touch on some of that item as well. Usually that process, because it's pretty different than the four-year college application process, the junior college enrollment window is usually a little bit shifted later on in the season. Usually you won't see many junior colleges enrolling for the next upcoming fall until around December, but the vast majority, it's going to be kind of in that spring time frame when most students, February through April is when most students will go through the enrollment process with junior colleges. So I'm going to kind of break down this this chart here. And so in general, what you're seeing here is I kind of charted to try to explain a little bit about on the kind of up and down y-axis, this idea of effort and undertaking. And on the bottom is time throughout high school. So we have the 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, and 12th grade. And so this idea of how high school morphs and changes is a pretty big one, especially for seniors. So 9th grade, most 9th graders take a pretty standard set of classes. There's no AP classes, things like that. Usually in 10th grade, they kind of ramp it up a little bit. Maybe they get more involved in their community or more involved in school. They might take an AP class or two. Okay, so kind of effort and energy associated with school increases. The next one kind of jumps into junior year, and this is one that I talk with the juniors quite a bit because many juniors will kind of ramp that effort undertaking up to 11, thinking that this is the most important year of high school, and they're all important. Junior year is very important, but it's just something that, you know, a lot of AP classes become available, and it's just something we see happening. Senior year kind of looks like this, and so a lot of times seniors tend to not necessarily stay at that same peak. Okay, maybe they're taking only 5 academic classes, maybe even 4, and so generally speaking, the effort and undertaking in relation to school somewhat decreases. They might, you will have extra stuff that you're doing outside of school, applications, work, different things that come around with being 17, 18 years old and going through the process of senior year. Okay, but here's the big thing that I'm trying to warn everybody about, because this is huge, and I guarantee you that almost all of you guys will see this in some form or fashion at some point during senior year. And this is generally associated with spring. All right, and so we will see this precipitous fall for a vast majority of students for a lot of different reasons. Okay, we're not going to break down each of them, but anything from just exhaustion to fear to depression to anxiety to excitement even. So, the spring rolls around, high school's almost over, they kind of got maybe a college admissions, maybe they have a place where they're going or a thing that they're going to do, a career to go into, and they don't really see the point of wrapping up high school as strongly as maybe they've maintained throughout the school year. And they actually put a diagnosis on this, and it's called Senioritis. All right, and so it kind of covers a lot of the stuff that we see in that kind of springtime. Usually here in Tahoe with the snow, hopefully we have a good year this year, but hopefully, we see this happening pretty consistently across the board. So I want to give you guys an early heads up. Okay, this is an early screening for both you seniors and senior families, is that we want to avoid senioritis at all costs. Just because someone gets in does not mean that someone is guaranteed a seat at a college. So I want to make sure that when you are approaching that kind of February, March, the snow starts to melt, the sun starts to come out, the beach is looking pretty good. We want to avoid this like the plague. Okay, so we'll have some tips on how to do that, and I'll be working with some students, and definitely it's a conversation if we start noticing this happening, because there's some pretty real ramifications of this coming into play. So I do want to talk a little about social emotional supports this year before we jump into kind of logistics, college, academics, that kind of stuff, because those are all very important, but social emotional components are crucial, and this year is going to be a big one. Sometimes this senior year is a doozy for students and families, and so maybe your student has never really struggled social emotionally, maybe they're pretty solid, maybe the family's pretty solid, but sometimes senior year can really bring up some deep, driven insecurities or questions or fear or concerns. And it is something that I want you to be hyper vigilant for, both in yourself if you're a student watching this, but also for you as families. All right, so just a couple of things that are going to be happening at North Tahoe High School this year include so all students are going to be receiving a daily mindfulness lesson from Hillary in our Wellness Center. If you don't know Hillary, she's a wonderful colleague of ours. She's part of our counseling team, and really somebody who students really trust, and we are super lucky to have on campus. And so her space is a welcoming place for students. So she'll be leading some daily short, 1-minute mindfulness lessons for students every day to start their day. Also, all students across all grade levels will receive a monthly social emotional learning focused pathways lesson. So that's about a half-hour lesson that students will all get. So we will be focusing the senior year primarily on kind of transitions and things like that, but it's going to be customized for seniors. So seniors don't need the same thing as freshmen. My office and the Wellness Center are also available for support. I work especially in the springtime with a lot of students about, I don't know what's right for me. I don't know how to make a decision. I don't know. I'm not sure how I'm going to function on my own. And so that is not necessarily something that's to be afraid of. And we're available anytime to talk about that. But we see a lot of that come up for seniors generally in that fall, or in that spring time frame. In the fall, a lot of it has to do with stress, just a lot of stuff to manage. Okay. And then building healthy habits. So starting the habits now that you want to kind of see yourself continue when you graduate. All right. So if that's healthy sleep habits, if that's healthy eating habits or exercising, okay, it's easier to start now and continue those things than to try to do that when you're in the midst of transition and change. And then know when some of the key stress windows are for the senior class. And so mid-November is a big one. Okay. Right around when many of the college applications might be due. That's a pretty stressful time frame. Mid-January is usually stressful for both kind of the holiday sense, and sometimes that's a stressful time frame, as well as finals. And then we have mid-April to mid-June. So basically that entire spring time frame, because of both senioritis and also just things that high school's coming to an end. This big piece that's been a part of the only type of schooling that people have known is coming to an end, and they're going to go off into the big world and do hopefully great and amazing things, but it's a very scary transition. All right. And that transition tends to look like a couple of these kind of big items. And so ultimately, we have a myriad of different options that students can do throughout and consider for their high school, their after high school careers. All right. And so just a couple of them are up here. And I want to, again, emphasize that we are not a school that just emphasizes and expects students to go to college. I think that sometimes it is maybe misinterpreted as a focus of ours. We do highly encourage it. We do think it's a valuable option. We do see many of our students go onto that path. However, that is by and far not the only path, and many paths require lots of loops and turns to get where you want to go, my own included. And so I understand that there's not a single strategy, a single path to everyone's idea of success. Okay, so I want to encourage that. So we do have the four-year college options, and we'll break down each of those. We have the community college route, and that is an increasingly popular route for many of our students. Whether or not that's kind of initially on their plan, I would encourage all students, whether or not a student has a 5.0 GPA and perfect SAT scores, I would encourage all students to have a community college or two in mind that they would see themselves at. Should something go that way, or if they feel like that is the right path for them after high school. There's a lot of reasons to look at different routes, from cost to availability to access and convenience. We have the trade and vocational schools, so that would be things like Universal Technical Institute for auto mechanics, or Culinary Institute of America if you want to be a pastry chef, things like that. The military branches, going straight into a career path, and also gap years. So we're going to not necessarily, we'll have a specific community college event a little bit later this fall. And then I'm available just because it's generally not as widely utilized. I would love to connect with you guys if you guys are interested in trade or vocational schools, military, career paths, things like that. And we will have some upcoming opportunities that are related to that in the future. So a couple tricks and tips that you might want to think about as we go about your senior year. All right. And so that is something that when you guys are looking at right now, for example, your senior schedule, take advantage of your opportunities. One thing I always like to remind people, this is your last year of free education. All right. After this year, if you want to go get educated on something, apart from say like YouTube or things like that, but a formal education, it's going to cost you a lot of money. All right. And so take advantage of this. If you were thinking about how much each class costs, would you really take only 4 classes instead of 5? Okay. So just think about that. It's a great way to grow your mind and grow your opportunities. Challenge yourself to explore new things even this year. All right. So you're about to step out into a world. And so trying to put yourself in a little bit of an uncomfortable situation from time to time. Try something new. Get involved in a club that maybe you wouldn't have normally. Okay. I still challenge you to do that. And then also, again, stay on top of your work. Those are big things. It's very easy to get behind, especially if you're taking a large number of academic courses. So the other one is really learning how to give appropriate thanks. This is one that is, I think, missing quite a bit from our society in general. But it's something that the art of thanks has really changed. And this is something that, as a senior, expect to practice this quite a bit this year. The senior year requires a lot of support. The senior year requires a lot of help from people other than yourself, students. All right, so this is something that goes a long ways. This week during Pathways, I'll be pushing in and talking about letters of recommendation. We're not going to spend a lot of time here, but students, you'll be getting information this week on letters of recommendation. That is a huge thanks opportunity, okay? Because those are actually a very big deal. However, it takes a lot of time and energy, and I'm not even speaking on part of myself. I can shut my door and take care of these things, but I'm talking about your teachers, okay? Your teachers are not paid extra to write your letters. Your teachers are not allocated time to write your letters, so it is an important thing to start practicing that idea of thanks. And it can be as simple as just a heartfelt word of thanks, a quick note. I can tell you some teachers really like coffee. Okay, so I mean, it's all kinds of things that just go, it just shows that you care, okay, because it does, they pour their heart and energy into it. Taking time to apply for financial aid and scholarships. This is an error that I see a lot of students do. It's amazing how many we actually have trouble sometimes giving away scholarships locally because no one qualified applied, if you can believe that. We give away a lot of money locally, but some of it is earmarked for certain paths or certain programs or certain types of students. And so many times students won't apply. I can almost guarantee you if you apply for scholarships, at least locally, you're probably going to get one. Okay, so if you like money, make sure you apply for scholarships. And we'll talk more about how to do some of that scholarship process again closer to October when the FAFSA opens up, and we'll lay out some of the kind of ins and outs of how to make sure that your after high school plans are as financially approachable as possible. And don't wait. Get on it right away. We want to kind of get this going as soon as possible. You want to spread it out so you don't need to stress the second, but you don't want to just dilly-dally and try to do it all at the last minute. This is not a last-minute activity this year. All right, so we want to keep that up. Seniors, this is going to be the piece that I'm going to be talking about with you guys in Pathways. This is called the senior profile. It's kind of like an extended brag sheet. We will be asking if you guys need letters of recommendation for us, from myself, from teachers, administrators, anybody on campus. We will be asking you for your senior profile. This is not intended to be extra work, but it is something that I do want you to start working on because it can, it's information that's very useful for our writing. However, it can feel a little bit like extra work. Be smart about it. I'm not looking for paragraphs. If you can answer in a couple bullet points, do it. Okay, we're not trying to add extra things on, but it is something that's very important, and the information on there is super valuable. So please don't just kind of fluff it off. Another thing is the explore. So we do put a lot of resources up on our counseling website, and I would definitely encourage you guys to hop on there. If we have some time at the end, I'll actually show you a few key areas that you might want to explore with this stuff in mind. Just if we don't get there, if you're not kind of with me by the time we get there, just so you know, underneath the menu towards the top right under counseling support, there's a college and career area, and you can explore all the other ones as well. But under college and career, you'll find some details, and there's menus underneath there, but if you just click on college and career counseling, there's a link and a bunch of different resources that you might want to avail yourself as we go through this year, including that senior profile sheet that you can download on Google Drive. So like I mentioned, we do think that post-secondary education and training, and I think that's an important designation. Training is not just college. Training can be an apprenticeship, training can be shadowing, training can be getting on YouTube even and doing some massively online open courseware. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff. It's really about bettering yourself. Okay, but we do know, at least the data shows, that many times, and this is always thrown out there, and I always say there's a lot, data can be skewed a lot of ways, so I don't want to feel like I'm kind of pulling the wool over your eyes, but in general, the higher your education, the lower your employment, so you're more likely to get a job, and usually the higher you earn. Okay, it costs money to earn money sometimes, and so sometimes that, we can make a case that education matters, but we also know it's not the whole picture. Okay, so we have the skilled trades and technical work. We haven't seen many times when those fields are in quite as high a demand as they are now. You go look around just Tahoe, and people are trying to pay, $20, $25 an hour for something that doesn't even require a high school degree sometimes. And not to say that that's not important, but I'm just saying, there are times when particular fields are in very high demand and limited quantity of workers are available in these trades and technical skills that require some additional training, but maybe not a formal college degree, are super in demand. So I want to honor that and recognize that. Okay, our model here is that college should be available. So we push students to meet A through G, and we push students to be ready for college, but it is not a path that we recognize is for everyone, and everyone will have their own path. So I want to recognize that too. It's all about knowing what you want out of this upcoming experience. Okay, so we know that your goals are important, and the path for success is all about your learning and innovation and development of your mindset. Okay, it's not about a particular program or major typically. All right, and that can even go for students who are pursuing college degrees. Okay, it's the degree helps you get your foot in the door. Okay, but your innovation, your learning, your approach to a problem is what helps you seal the deal. Okay, that's what helps you keep your job, makes you successful in your job. All right, and helps you land that job after you kind of have gotten through the door. Okay, this 4-year college process is super long and complex, and so we're going to highlight a couple roles and norms that are going to be super crucial for all of us to kind of work together on. All right, so parents and families, if you're watching this, one of the biggest things is letting go, and this is one of the biggest mistakes I see parents make or family members make, is that you kind of are living vicariously through your child. Okay, and there's a lot of ways to do it, from actually filling out the applications and such for them. I get it. Your child might be busy. They have a lot of activities and busy in school. Do not steal the epiphany. Let me say that again. Do not steal the epiphany. If you need to look it up, go ahead, pause it, do that now. Okay, the epiphany is the aha moment. All right, and so do not steal that from your senior. They need to struggle through this. Your child cannot do everything. There's not enough time for them to do everything. Don't enable them to do that. That is not helpful. Okay, so I want you to let go. Our job, and I'm including me in this process and everyone here at school, we are cheerleaders, we are encouragers, but we do not enable students. Okay, so next time you have a question, or next time your student needs something, I want you to kind of put through this filter, because a lot of times I see this. Many times I'll actually communicate more with the parent than I will the student. And I don't think that's right. So if you notice you email me and I include your student on the reply, that's why. Your student is involved and they need to be a part of that conversation. You also need to separate the nuts and bolts, so the logistics of the process, from the emotional part of the process. It's very emotional, and that also goes for the student. Okay, so pick a time when you want to talk about, here's the ins and outs, here's the time frame, here are the things that we are going to be doing to help make this process smooth. Okay, and then pick a time also to talk about the emotions that are related to the process. I'm mad, I'm frustrated, I'm super pissed because the school denied me, whatever it might be. Okay, but try not to do them at the same time. It muddies the water. Okay, and again, support but not do. And then I even suggest, like, call it a date, call it a hangout, whatever, go get ice cream, set meetings to talk about this. Don't just let it happen naturally. Sometimes that's the case, but like set purposeful meetings about it, because that will help go a long way in not feeling like an ambush, not feeling pressure, not feeling like nagging parents. The students often feel like they're being nagged about things. Okay, but set some regular checkpoints. If you're in business, projects don't just happen, right? They have checkpoints, they have check-ins, they go through this process of development. Students, always look at the process in light of what your goals are. What is your potential vocation or career path in the future? What's your purpose? Don't just look at the U.S. News and World Report, which, by the way, is a complete farce. Don't use that for anything. It's based on money and advertising, not any rankings. Okay, there are some other ones that I would encourage maybe looking through, but realistically, rankings really mean nothing. Okay, nobody pays attention to rankings. Even college admissions officers themselves would agree with that statement. Okay, so simply just try to avoid it. It puts this idea in people's heads of what's good or not, and realistically, almost all colleges are going to be great, and it's more about what's great for your child. Okay, students, I want you to stay organized, and number one thing, if you don't have, is a calendar. Okay, a Google Calendar works, a paper calendar works. A calendar that you will use is the most important part. Okay, because in the world, there are things called deadlines. I know at North Tahoe High School, it sometimes doesn't feel like that. Okay, but there are real things out there called deadlines that have a deadline, meaning if you go past that, you are not submitting an application. If you go past this date, you get no money for college. If you do this or other thing, bad things may happen. Okay, so deadlines are super, super crucial, and there's going to be a lot of them this year, so get a calendar. And then also apply broadly, but limit your applications to a reasonable number. Okay, and I'm going to break that down here on this next slide. So a lot of times when we're talking about the idea of college, this kind of like model will come up, and I kind of go back and forth between whether I like it or not. It's this or that. But ultimately what I want you to think about is this allows you to apply broadly in that you're not betting statistics against you, okay? But it also applies broadly in that you are diversifying your application list, all right? And you can call these things whatever you want. You'll see different people call them what they are: reach, target, meet, different things like that, okay? But the goal is, if you have some schools that are kind of in this reach category, okay, schools that have 5, 10, 20% admissions rate, or maybe you don't meet the kind of ideal candidate, kind of 50% target, okay, those schools are going to be harder than easier for you to get into. Those are going to be your reach schools, okay? They may be reach for everybody. Okay, if they have a 10% admissions rate, they're a reach school for anybody. I don't care if you like cured cancer. Okay, it is something that you just have to account for. If your entire list is made up of reach schools, you're playing statistics against you. On the other side of the spectrum, you have the expected, likely. In the olden days, we used to call them safe schools. No school is safe. I will just warn you there. All right, so no school is actually safe. We will just basically call them like, we will probably get into these schools. These are good to have too, because it provides you a level of comfort, a level of stability. Maybe they're not your first choice school, maybe they are. Okay, and then you have a couple that are kind of fit schools where you kind of are in that range where you may or may not get in, but they're strong. You're a strong candidate for. Okay, at the bottom you see that all of them though must be first choice, and that's probably a little confusing. The first choice here means out of all this list, if we had 11 schools on this list when all came down to it, you might have a hierarchy in terms of like, hey, if I got into all these schools and the money was there, here's my first choice, second choice, third choice, etc. However, if I got into one of these schools only, I would still be happy going to that school. That is what I mean by first choice schools. Okay, it's not that you can't have rankings and like which one's higher up on the list for me. It's just that I'm not adding a school to my list because mom or dad wants me to. I'm not adding a school to my list because it looks good on my applications. I'm not adding it because I know I can get in, but I don't really want to go. That's just dumb. Okay, just don't do it. Add schools that you want to go to. And parents, this is challenging. Do not make your child apply to schools they don't want to go to. It's really that simple. Okay, and I'll tell you that too if I see a list and I talk to your child and they're like, I don't really want to go there. I'm going to tell you, parents. So I'm going to be honest with you, and I'm going to encourage your student to be honest with you too. But I'm here to also advocate for them, so I want you guys to know that as well. I'm going to bump around here to a different slide. I'm going to skip a section because I think it's a little bit too in depth for our conversation today. But what I'm going to do is talk to you guys because a lot of stuff has changed in this idea of testing. All right. And so testing in the world today has been something that, we've had to adapt to over the last 18 months. Testing kind of got turned on its head since COVID hit, and test centers got canceled, and different things were happening throughout the world. Okay, and I would probably, if I was speaking on behalf of my colleagues and most of the admissions officers in the world, I would say almost everybody is very happy about that change. Okay. The SAT and ACT and that kind of stuff is generally not loved in our profession. It's very debatable in terms of its validity, in terms of its impact. And so when this change happened, we kind of felt it kind of forced the hand of a lot of colleges, which I think ended up well. But let me discuss a little bit what that actually means. So in the world today, we're going to have 3 primary things. Okay, we're going to have test required, schools that require an exam for admissions. In the olden days, like in 2019 and before, that would be CSUs, that would be UCs, and things like that. That has changed. Realistically speaking, there are very few schools, and I'm talking like less than 0.01% of colleges out there that formally require an exam. All right, and that will be an important thing for you to check because you still have time to take tests if you need to. Okay, but most schools will not require it. Military academies, I think Florida institutions, so some of the Florida state institutions, some of the Texas institutions, from last I've heard, still are requiring it. It is a very fluid environment though, so check that regularly as you're going through the process. The vast majority have transitioned to 2 other models, which are most prevalent now. Okay, probably the most prevalent is test optional. What that means is that you can take an exam and you can choose whether or not you submit a score. All right. If you submit a score, they're going to evaluate your results with that included and considered. If you don't, they're going to look more closely at the other areas of your application. All right. They have metrics and ways to evaluate people fairly across the board, whether you submit a test or not. All right. Many schools were like this already, but it's really kind of pushed the hand, and we like to see that because there's a lot of reasons. We're not going to go into it. A lot of reasons why testing was impacting college admissions negatively. The third option, which I think is actually the best, is something called test blind. Okay, and this is going to be most important because the vast majority of where our students apply and go are both test blind. Our CSU system and our UC system are both test blind, meaning even if you took an SAT exam or even if you took an ACT exam, they will not utilize the scores. They will not look at it. They will not accept them. They will not consider it in any fashion. Okay, the only thing that they would ever use that for is after any type of admissions process, potentially for some sort of placement. But realistically speaking, most students will place just fine if you get in through your academic experience in high school. Okay, so there are some opportunities to take a look here. So let me get back over to this. There are some pretty cool slides that you can take a look at in terms of, or websites that you can take a look at. FairTest.org is a national organization that keeps track of who takes tests and who doesn't. So as you can see from the screenshot, and it's probably even more now, there's over 1,400 four-year colleges and universities with test optional policies. Okay, so it keeps getting updated. The screenshot is from April. Okay, I'm sure there's more on there now. So you want to keep in mind that. That's an important thing for us to just keep abreast of. Let me talk briefly about applications. Actually, before I get there, let me just mention one more thing about testing. Because testing causes a lot of anxiety, both the actual test itself, but like the impacts and implications. I always try to kind of like give some context in terms of testing. And so generally speaking, because everyone always wants to know, should I take a test and should I submit it? That takes a little bit of research on your part. All right, if you look at a list of colleges and if you say took a PSAT, or if you took a practice SAT online or something like that, and even if you took an SAT and do I want to send this in? You're going to probably want to score pretty highly in terms of their other applicants to have it positively impact you. If that does that make sense? So if you want that test score to reflect positively on you, I mean, you're talking 80, 85 percentile of submitted test scores or higher. All right, so that typically means you need to be a very strong test taker. If you're kind of feeling like tests aren't really your thing, if you have heavy test anxiety, tests aren't really been successful in the past, I would probably just encourage you, don't add this extra needed stress. Focus on the other areas of your application and just don't worry about it. Okay, in almost all circumstances, you'll never need it. Okay, so it's just one less thing for you to worry about in this whole process, especially as you're rolling into senior year. You can take most schools, if you are going to be taking tests, most schools will take through around November or December, depending on the school, and application type, which actually we're going to talk about now. So there's different applications out there that students will use to apply, as well as different application timeframes. First, let's talk about the types of application, and there's a few common ones. So the first one on this list you see on the screen is called the Common Application. All right, and I'm going to denote that that has a big C, big A, formal organization, the Common App. Okay, and so that is a website, that's an organization that partners with tons of mostly private out-of-state institutions. You're not going to see any CSUs, UCs on there. You'll see mostly private and out-of-state public institutions available to apply. But it's a very useful tool if you are going to be applying to multiple schools. If you're going to apply to like one or two private schools and most of the rest are not on this application, sometimes it's actually easier to not use the Common App because it adds some extra steps. We have the school-specific application, or in-house application, sometimes you'll hear it called. And what that is basically, say Montana State develops their own application, they want students to submit, they might give you options. They might say, hey, submit your Common App, or you can fill out our in-house app. The benefit of that, they're going to only ask you the questions that matter to them. So for example, if they don't necessarily want recommendations, they might not ask you for them, where Common App may make you think about that kind of thing, or change a little bit of the process to be simpler. The next three on there are pretty underutilized in our school. So universal application is not usually a thing. The Common App Black application, we're pretty underrepresented with the African American population here at the campus, so not usually utilized. Priority applications, sometimes you might get those in the email or notices about that. If you're going to get invited, don't. It's not a for sure thing. Sometimes it goes to your head. But basically, it's going to say, hey, we got your name from some database, and we think you might be a good applicant. We'll just typically waive your fee. All right, which is a good thing. So if you can get a free app out of it, go ahead. But don't necessarily apply just because they say we think you'll be a good applicant. Here's a free application. Fast applications, kind of same idea. And the last one is probably the most common. So it's really the first, second, and last one that are going to be probably the most frequent ones you'll see. So the UC app, the UC application itself, and I need to update it. It's called CSU Apply, not CSU Mentor anymore. They changed it. Okay. And I said the first one is the Common App, big C, big A. The last two are also common applications, little c, little a. They are a Common App, not the Common App. And what I mean by that is the UC application, when you fill out a UC, you can apply to any of the UCs through that application. Okay, so it's common to the UC system. Same thing with the CSU Apply application. It is common to the CSU system. All right, so you'll only fill out one kind of true application for each of those two university systems. Okay. I'm going to touch on a couple of these things real quick. A lot of the stuff you can find online, so I'm just going to highlight a couple things. We mentioned the application window for the University of California is November 1st through the 30th. The application has been open since August 1st. Meaning students can log on, complete the application, things like that, but they can't actually hit submit and pay until November 1st rolls around. So those of you that might be rushing through the application process, you can hit the slow down button and you have time to spread that out. Okay, and I think your application will probably benefit if you do. It's only online, and then there are a fee per campus. So it's going to be a per campus application fee, and you can qualify through the system itself for up to 4 fee waivers, and the system will determine if you qualify for that based on your family income that you use. Okay, the last part, test scores. If you are, well, actually, that can just be deleted now. So I don't think I updated this last year, so we did a different format. So ignore the last check mark. You can't send test scores to the UCs, so don't worry about it. That's a pretty simple answer to that. Here's a breakdown, and I think this is better to look at than kind of the odd years of COVID. But this kind of just gives you an idea of stats. Okay, and again, I don't do this to kind of like worry people, to scare people, things like that, but it gives you a breakdown. So the UC system is accessible. Okay, it's not something that every campus is necessarily easily accessible, but if you want to attend a UC, you can. It just might not be Berkeley or UCLA. All right, so you can see it goes from very low admissions rate, more difficult, to very high. All right, and I think one of the biggest things I want you to pay attention to is the difference between how many students applied. And this number, I participated in a UCLA session towards the end of last year, and they highlighted their number of applicants, and they had over 130,000 applicants last year. Okay, and so the numbers are pretty staggering. And so just know that it's not, a lot of times, as personal as it is for families and students and us at school, it's really, unfortunately, not personal. There's so many different variables, and we'll break down a few of them, but so many different variables involved in all college processes that it feels very personal, like they don't like me, when really it's usually not that simple if you don't get in. All right, so I want to just kind of give you that little bit of a reality take in that, if you apply broadly, you're probably not going to get into all your schools, and that's okay. The goal is to get into a few and have some choices from that. So you're going to fill out the UC application itself, and your eligibility is based on your A through G coursework, and your GPA is calculated based on your 10th and 11th grade school years. So your 9th grade is actually not included in the GPA calculation. You do not use any letters of recommendation, but there is personal insight questions, which are short writing responses for the UCs. Okay. During RTI in the upcoming year, we'll be having different things. I'll be hosting essay workshops. We'll be hosting college kind of just drop in help with my application times. So you'll be seeing some of that pop up here in the next couple of weeks. Most RTIs, probably most Wednesdays. Okay. So take a look at some of those different things. Again, ignore the pieces about reasoning tests and subject tests and stuff like that. That has gone away for this upcoming school year. This is a picture of comprehensive review. I'm just going to, if you want to pause it and take a look at this, I'll let you do that. Again, test scores are off of this now, so it's basically reallocated the weighting of the test score to other areas of the comprehensive review. Another way to look at this is holistic review. And that's basically when students are not just a piece of paper and a test score. So they are going to look at what are you doing in class in senior year, this quality of senior year program of study. They are going to look at what is your GPA? What did you take advantage of in comparison to other peers? Did you show any improvement, or did you maintain your high level of achievement? Did you do any special participation? How about like outside of school activities? Okay, they take into account all that stuff. Okay, I am not going to go through the personal insight questions. I have them listed here. Okay, but you can see that you're going to have 8 to choose from. You're going to pick 4, and they're limited to 350 words, which sometimes is harder than you may think. A lot of times people try to write too much. All right, but it is something to just keep in mind. And they may have updated this. I think they were planning on keeping the same. The only thing that could be in there might be an additional COVID question. So just keep an eye out for that. Again, filling out the application, and this can be applicable to any application that you're filling out. All right. First and foremost, read the instructions. I cannot emphasize this enough. And it's very simple. It's probably the most common thing that I get is, I don't know how to do this. And I would literally pull up their computer, read the instructions to them, like, oh. So literally sit down and read the question, read the instructions, and then read them again if you're still confused. All right, there are legit questions. I'm not saying don't ask questions, but do yourself and everybody else a favor by just doing your diligence and not just kind of rushing and skipping some steps of going and asking other people. Usually they've been asked enough where there's a FAQ option. If you do a Google search and find it on the UC website, just work on reading the instructions. You can always call the admissions department if it kind of gets beyond my recognition of the problem or things like that. That's my first go-to. I'm going to try to get a hold of someone who knows from the inside. Okay, and please do let me help you. I'm happy to review applications. Sometimes I catch little things like there's a number 7 in your first name. That probably shouldn't be there. To bigger things like, hey, you left out an entire year of English on your application. Let's fix that. This is your one shot. You want it to be right. Don't rush it. Okay, take the time to get it reviewed and get it reviewed several times. I'm happy to do that. We just need to kind of set it up in advance. So the common application, a couple common questions around it. Totally different website. Most of your students are probably familiar with it if you're doing that application system. Okay, but there's a few differences. You're going to have longer form writing components of it. But another thing that is often comes up is we do not report class rank. All right, so on many of the applications, it may ask you this. You just either hit not applicable, we don't report, leave it blank. Different applications will have you do different things with it. All right, so we do not report that, and we will not. So if you ask us, we don't have it, so we can't even give it to you. UC and CSU applications do not. This is important. Probably one of the biggest errors I see on those two applications. Do not want your non-A through G courses. Okay, in your course history or in your GPA calculation. So that would be like PE, Learning Center, Strength Development, Pathways. Don't enter them. Okay, if you generally do not see your course on your list of courses, it usually shouldn't go on there, with the exception if you came from an out-of-state school that didn't maintain an A through G course list. Again, if you have a complicated, history at different schools, that kind of stuff, again, ask for help. I'm happy to support you guys with that. CSUs, probably the easiest applications out there. All right, so they're very simple. The application window and the application itself is not even open yet. So you can't log on to CSU Apply until October 1st, but you can submit from October 1st to November 30th. So you can start it, submit it, and do it all if you were really dumb on the first day. I'm just kidding, but you can get it all done the first day it opens because it's open to submit during that window. You should not. It's all online again. You have 23 campuses, $55 per campus. And And just note that many campuses are what are called impacted, meaning that they have too many students. Okay, and that's going to help lower their admissions rate, which causes problems in that getting in. So, places like Cal Poly, Long Beach, San Diego State, especially in, some of them are campus-wide and programs. So like Cal Poly Engineering, campus-wide impaction, too many kids on campus and too many kids in engineering. All right, so they are having to increase their eligibility requirements for that. There is no essay, no writing, no personal statement, all right? No letters of recommendation. Your eligibility is based on grades, and just like the UCs, on their recalculated GPA when you're looking at a transcript, the best kind of assumption and calculation is the one that is in the academic GPA 10 through 12 is what you'll see on it. That's probably the best guess of your GPA. Again, they're going to recalculate it, and many colleges do, so try not to think too deeply into it. It is what it is. You can't really change it. Okay. Again, no SAT or ACT scores are accepted. Some of the most competitive schools in the CSU is Cal Poly, Long Beach, San Diego State. Some of the least competitive, more open and available, Sonoma, Humboldt, Stanislaus, Chico, and San Bernardino. Sonoma State in particular has a large cadre of North Tahoe High School students, and a lot of students do like looking at Sonoma State and have found it a very welcoming campus. Chico is another one, and many of our teachers are actually Chico alum, so it's a great school to consider as well. I would say Sacramento State is probably the closest, as well as the most favorable campus to take us. They're what are called our local CSUs, so they would probably be the simplest. Some tips for the CSU, since we have most students apply there. Don't try and just remember your classes. Get your transcript up. You're going to use a copy of that when you're filling it out, and you're going to be matching it. Okay, and it's something that you're going to be matching with. And if you have to type in classes from North Tahoe High School, especially, you're probably doing something wrong. Okay, so it's going to match, and so you want to match your classes successfully. And again, it's more about entering that information right. Okay, you're not going to be entering tons of like extracurriculars and writing, all that stuff. It's really just about kind of putting in your information. Private colleges, again, very, very widely different deadlines. All right, you can have anything. The next slide is actually about different types of applications, which I'll highlight kind of why that matters for deadlines. But you are in charge of kind of knowing when their deadlines are, and you might see a myriad of options. We'll break down all these different admissions types here next. Many of the private colleges, again, if you're going to be doing Common App or other applications, many of them will do require letters of recommendation. For the Common App, letters of recommendation are myself. I am pretty much required for all students. We're going to talk letters of recommendation, like I said, in Pathways this week. A couple notes for parents if you're watching. So nobody's required to write a letter. And I will never write a letter that I can't write a positive letter for. All right. So if I ever said like, hey, sorry, I can't write a letter, it's either because we've had pretty poor interactions in the past and my letter would not be super glowing on your behalf. And so no letter is better than that letter. Or I don't know you. And that's a problem, especially for students who just recently maybe moved to our school. It's going to be a little bit more challenging this year. And that's why I'm kind of embedding a couple things to help with that. I'm putting in some specific connection time in my week to just call students in and spend 15, 20 minutes talking to them and finding out more about who they are. Because we haven't had that in the last, since they were 10th graders, and they barely were on my caseload at that point. So it's been a little bit tough for one, but especially if I know many of our students, but especially if you're new, many times in that circumstance, I might ask, hey, is there someone else that might be better to write this? And you can submit one on my behalf. My only requirement with that is I have to be able to read it. I'm not willing to submit a blind letter of recommendation with my name on it. And then 2 teachers is what's most common. Okay, and parents, just let us work with this with your students. They're responsible for this. So in Pathways students, we'll get to that. They also get a secondary school report. So that's going to be transcript, an overview, kind of a little bit of information about our school. They also get a mid-year report. CSUs, UCs, they don't actually get typically updates from your first semester of senior year. Most private schools will, meaning they're going to see your first semester grades before they're making decisions about you. All right. However, it's something that we're going to generally do that pretty seamlessly as we go through high school. All right, let me kind of highlight a little bit about this. I know we're probably going to be a little over our time today, but do not worry. Most of the stuff we will cover pretty much as we expected to. So there are several different ways that students will be applying. I would say the most common one, kind of going from left to right, is that regular decision. Okay, it's kind of put in two categories: non-restrictive and restrictive application plans. The non-restrictive, this regular decision, that would be what most people would consider regular applications. All right, meaning they have a start date. Say it opens like CSU's on October 1st, and the decision date is November 30th. CSUs and UCs are only regular decision schools. They do not have any other application type. Okay, don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Okay, submitting your application November 1st is the same thing as submitting your application November 30th. All right, and so that's something just to be aware of. So it's really, it's just kind of a window of time typically, but they usually have a deadline. Rolling admissions, Montana State's a great example of rolling admissions. Rolling admissions means they're going to process your application as you submit it. All right, so when Montana State gets, starts their school year, they open up their application on a certain date and usually have a very long, extensive window to submit. Many times it's like, we'll take it starting October 1st and you can submit it through April 30th. All right, and they have that window of time. And they're going to process as they come in. So say you submit an application in November, usually within a couple weeks, they're going to turn around and let you know if you're in or not. Usually schools like this, it's not so much of you're competing for a seat necessarily. It's so much, are you qualified or not? All right. And so this is a really nice one. Oftentimes if you have a rolling admissions, it's kind of nice and kind of a nice chip off your shoulder to have a school that already knows you can go there. All right. Early action is basically a benefit for you, the student or family. And that's really where they might have an early deadline that says if you meet the EA or early action deadline, we will send out an earlier notification of acceptance or denial or deferral. All right. It really does not benefit students, okay, other than the informational piece. Okay, it does not help your application process doing this. And sometimes it can actually hurt in the sense that if sometimes students are rushing to submit an early action application and you might not submit the best application because you were in a hurry. Okay, but it has no impact on your admissions kind of likelihood. All right. Where the other side, see early decision, these are what are called restrictive application plans. And what that means is you're often limited to only one, and you are kind of legally entering a contract basically with that school that says, if you let me in, I'm going to meet this early deadline. Many times it's pretty early, November, sometime, that you have to submit an application. If I submit this, I'm only going to apply to one other early decision school. I can apply anywhere else regular, anywhere else rolling, but only one other place early decision or early action or restrictive early action. And if you let me in, I'm going to withdraw all my other applications and I'm going to place a deposit immediately. Okay. And so this is a big deal. Okay. This is one that a lot of people I think kind of rush through and think, oh, I'm just going to apply early decision. It's going to help me. And it does. Okay, it does help the admissions process. They're looking for, if we had some time, I'd take you through the enrollment management process, but I don't. If you were curious about it, let me know. We can talk it through. But early decision basically is a for sure seat. They are looking for yield at the end of the process, meaning how many students are actually going to show up on day one of school. This early decision is a for sure bet for people who are going through admissions. So what that means is they're going to look at you a little bit more fondly. It's not going to generally take you from a not admissible student to an admissible student. It usually just helps you get over the hump, all right? But it's going to allow you to be looked at a little bit more favorably by the school, which can help you get in potentially. The downside is if you get in, you don't really get to choose and look at other options. You're going to have to withdraw those things. You also have to know that you can afford and pay for it. There are a few kind of finagling ways out that you can kind of, if they offer you a $40,000 difference in terms of your costs, they oftentimes might let you out of that decision, but it's up to the college. Okay, so it is a big deal. It's something that parents have to sign off on. I have to sign off that we've had a conversation about it. So it's not something to be taken lightly. So do that with caution. Restrictive early action is kind of the same thing, except you don't have to typically place a decision and a deposit immediately like you do an early decision. Okay, but you still can't apply other places in that early time frame. We talked a little bit about the common application, but what do we do if we're still looking for schools? Okay, so what if we're still like developing our list, which is not a bad thing necessarily, okay, but it's something that you want to definitely kind of work towards. All right, a couple questions that you might want to ask yourself are on the screen here. Number one, how much does it cost to attend, and do you qualify for financial aid? All right, most, if not all colleges that most people are going to look at will have a net price calculator. You can Google it, Cal Poly net price calculator. It usually has you ballpark your income, things like that, and it will kind of spit out a rough idea. Again, think of it as rough. We're not, when we go over financial aid, we kind of do it backwards. We reverse shop, figure out where we want to go, and then we figure out how much it's going to cost here in America. It's not the best, but that's the way it goes. But generally speaking, the sticker price is not how much you're going to pay. However, college is an investment, and it's expensive. Okay, so you have to kind of get at least some general ballpark directions to kind of make sure, again, you're diversifying not only admissions. You don't want to all reach schools, all safety schools. You also don't want all private schools that are going to be super expensive. You want to spread the love. We'll break down how that happens in October. But what other resources are available to students? Okay, you might, do they have study groups? Do they have health support on campus? Do they have tutoring? Do they have a library? Do they have intramural sports? Do they have support for students with disabilities? I mean, there's all kinds of things that you might want to know about. What kind of activities to make things enjoyable and fun for students around campus, because it's not just about academics. It's also about the environment. It's about location. It's about how students feel on campus. What are the housing different options? Sometimes that's a secondary question that people ask about, okay? Yes, of course, you have to get in first before you look at housing, right? Looking at housing before you get in is kind of a non-starter, but you should probably do some exploration at least to make sure that you know kind of what you're getting yourself into. That's also important for junior college, because most junior colleges don't have dorms, so you need to kind of know what the living experience are going to be like. Placement offices, things like that are all going to be awesome. Visits are tough, and they have been tough, given lack of openness, lack of transportation, things like that, worrying about COVID and travel and that kind of thing. So if you're able to, awesome. If not, at least do some virtual tours. Most colleges have done virtual tour experiences that you can find online. We talked about doing the FAFSA already and the net price calculator. Just the one thing that I want while you're in this process of kind of like applying, refining, things like that. Again, diversity is important. You won't know how much college is going to cost until you kind of get a full picture back. All right. So usually I want people to kind of start their initial list without considering cost, but at this point you want to start having it come into play. In families, this is a good opportunity for you to sit down with your students, say, here's what we maybe have available. Here's what we need you to kind of really work hard on. Okay. We have nothing set aside. Depending on your income, the government might say you need to have some stuff set aside, so you might have to kind of look at your financial situation a little bit. But you might just have that frank conversation like, this is reality. Okay. And the other piece about finances, you want to have a 4-year perspective. All right. This is not something that happens once. This is at least 4 years in the making. All right. And so you can't make a decision based on, well, we can swing it for a year. Okay. It wipes out your savings, or, the loan doesn't sound too bad, but it's only 1 year, and then you multiply it by 4 or 5 and it's kind of astronomical or not possible. All right. So you do have to kind of consider the longer term impact of applying to certain colleges, and consider different alternatives if some of them are maybe outside of the realm of possibility. We're going to kind of skip through some of the deciding elements to kind of get through this. We can cover this at another date, but let me talk briefly about what happens after we submit, since students might get there pretty quickly. All right, so when a student hits submit on their application, in the past we've actually done a college admissions case study. Maybe you've participated in that. We haven't been able to do that since COVID, and not going to be able to do that this year, but hopefully in the future we can for younger students. But when they hit submit, many times the colleges are going to have to go through and read them, and every college does read the applications. All right, UC's, like you saw, 108,000, 130,000 applications. Every single one of those applications gets read by a human being at least twice. Okay, it might only take 4 or 5 minutes per read, but every single one does get read. All right, so it's very quick. They don't have a lot of time. Okay, but they are purposeful in their reading and process. Okay. Students might have to follow up with some additional items. That's that follow-up component I mentioned on the timeline. They might ask for, if you submitted test scores, for them to submit those officially. They might ask for transcripts. They might ask for additional letters of recommendation, for other pieces of detail that they might need from you. And that's where checking emails, checking portals, things like that all become super, super crucial in this process. Usually in mid-spring, anywhere typically from around January through generally April, you start to see the admissions results come back in. They usually come back digitally through a portal as well. Okay, very rarely will you see anything in the mail, kind of like the good old days. And then usually after that admissions, you'll start getting notices about financial aid, and that's really the offer that they're going to be giving you, and that's kind of where you start to, again, go through this other evaluation process. You kind of evaluate where you get in, then you have to reevaluate and look at where does it realistically look like we can go, because your first choice school might not be your first choice after looking at the finances, so you have to kind of reevaluate that process. Okay, we're going to look at that comparison. And again, May 1st has kind of been this target date in the past. Some laws and rules and court stuff happened, and May 1st can no longer necessarily be the date. Other schools might look at different dates, but it's a good kind of window of time and kind of a target for most schools. And I would say many schools still do apply that date. We're going to skip wait lists, but just know that if your student gets on a wait list, it's a good practice to kind of view that as a denial. And here's some data that just from like UCs, for example. UCSB, for example, had 4,800 students on a wait list. 8 of those 4,800 students were admitted. So it's really kind of a cruel, unfortunate way that they approach it, but sometimes it happens. I mean, the best way to get off a wait list is to get on it, but the reality is most students don't, so it's good to kind of just move on from that if you do. And then denials do happen in this process, all right? And like I mentioned earlier, if you apply kind of like we suggest, good chance you do get denied from a school, and that's not the end of the world. The goal is to not get denied from all of them. The goal is to find one that will want you, and hopefully several, because that's kind of the best case scenario. So I'm going to kind of just highlight briefly a couple different how-tos, and then I am going to just walk you through 2 different tools. One of them is Naviance, and one of them is our website, and just highlight a couple of resources that you might want to poke around there. Remember, this is a very general overview. We are going to be starting here in the next about week and a half, 2 weeks, booking our post-secondary planning meetings. Okay, and what those are going to be individual meetings, and that's where we can get more specific with each of you about your own process, about your own interests, about where you're at, about questions that you have. Okay, but we're going to be booking those, and those are about half hour, 45 minutes long with the student and preferably a family member or a trusted adult of some type who can come and be in person or on the computer for our conversation. And so you'll be getting some information about that here in the next week or 2 about booking that. And those will happen throughout the fall, and we'll be doing usually we'll have a couple slots a day. Unfortunately, I can't just do those all day, but we'll have a couple time frames throughout each day that you can get online and book. And then we will probably hopefully target having those done before Thanksgiving. All right, and so we'll have met with all the seniors hopefully by that point. Okay, so you might be getting some more calls or information from your student about that as well. So just a heads up on that, and that's another great place where we can talk more specifically about some of these questions maybe you have, and take this information and kind of consolidate that down into what applies to your particular situation and child, because this is general. It's hard to address large pieces of information to everybody because everyone's going to be different. And you'll see the same thing with some of our financial aid information too. We're kind of covering the basics and kind of the overview, but everyone's going to kind of have a slightly different flavor on it. So some tools just to mention, so you can look them up, but College Board's Big Future is a good search tool if you're still building that list or need to find some data. Excuse me. The Naviance search, which I'll just pull up here briefly in a second, is another great opportunity to find data and also find similar or schools that maybe you want to consider that maybe you weren't. Definitely talking with me. A lot of people work with independent consultants, that kind of stuff. Absolutely go for it if you have the means and desire to do so. What they will do is they will provide some additional kind of more one-on-one support in a more frequent, kind of more consistent type of way. Unfortunately, with even just the 11th and 12th grade students, I'm not able to meet as frequently as some students might like, and that's totally fine. I don't fault anybody. It doesn't hurt my feelings, but you don't have to do that. I'm happy to help you guys throughout this process. One of the biggest things that I need from you guys as students and family is to show some of that initiative. If I have to track you down to do that, it's really tough. If you kind of want to talk more frequently, set up some meetings and we can do that. All right. But you don't have to necessarily spend money to do that. But if you do, I'm happy to work with them as best they can. I do encourage you, if you are finding a consultant or a college counselor, as they might call them, they usually call IECs or independent educational consultants, make sure they're part of an association like NACAC or similar WACAC, because they hold them to high expectations. And then also make sure that they understand that this is a team process. I'm definitely open to communicating with them, but many times they're a little unfamiliar sometimes about our policies, procedures, expectations at school. And so sometimes they kind of, most of the ones I've worked with most commonly are really good. Sometimes if they're new, they just kind of come barge down the door and expect us to kind of like take every single piece of advice that they give us or you. And that's not always the case. That's possible, but we definitely try to work closely and hand in hand with them when possible. And so definitely, if you want to pursue that, you absolutely can. Let me show you the 2 tools, and then we'll wrap up for today. Like I said, we'll have some additional information coming up about junior college information, some of the other resources and opportunities after high school, as well as we will be doing the RTI sessions every week for at least throughout the fall, as well as different pathways lessons that you'll be getting. So I know you guys missed out on pathways last year, so we're going to kind of try to really get going on that right away and get some important information to your guys' hands. So please do ask questions. Please do come and seek some of that stuff out. So let me kind of just, I might have to adjust here real quick. So let me see how I want to do this. I want to add my browser here. So bear with me 1 second while I pull this into my system here. And then we will do, so I'm going to show this here on the screen. And I'm going to show you guys our Naviance system first. And this is a system that's available to all students at Nortel High School, including non-seniors. So let's see if we can get this up here on screen now. I think it is. Awesome. Cool. Let me get out of here so I can actually see it. All right. So when we're looking at Naviance, I'm going to pull up this demo account. So what we're looking at, just getting it. Open a new screen for me. Let's do this instead. All right, so this is a demo. We're going to make this a senior. And so what you're seeing on the screen is what students look at when they log in. They log in with Clever, which is their Google TTUSD account. All right, and there's a few key pieces up here. We do not use this to actually apply to college. All right, that's an important note. But students may be, say, for example, requesting transcripts here, and we'll kind of highlight that primarily with the students. But the key pieces that are going to be helpful in this college process especially is up here underneath this colleges area. If you click on it, it's going to kind of like take you through a generally advisable process. Finding schools that fit you if you're still doing some of the research, diving more specifically into some research processes, applying to college. Okay, again, we're going to be mainly looking at managing your transcript here, and then we will be updating scholarships lists for some of our local scholarships that are not part of our kind of common scholarship process on this link here. So one of the biggest things, if you're looking at, say, extending your college list, be like, I have a couple, but I probably should add a few more, this Supermatch College Search is pretty excellent. So it'll take a second to load up, and I'm just going to click Start Over to kind of clear everything out. And there's a couple different things. These different items on the top will bring up different kind of interfaces that you can choose from. And these are going to be search criteria. Okay, we have student life, diversity, institution characteristics, all right, size, cost, if they have athletics, academic elements, things like that, okay? And if we click on this, it's actually going to extend and let us pick majors. All right, and so what this will do is down here, as we add, so they added any major, as we add colleges, it's going to populate this list down below. And so, say for example, we wanted to stay on the West Coast or stay in California. Okay, we can do California. And as we can see, as we do that, it's going to populate this list. clearly there's a lot of schools in California, and that's the only search criteria they're looking for, so it's going to find a lot of matches. And it's going to say like, this is your match because everything is in California. Everything matches. However, if we start adding a few more, and you want to kind of fine tune this to maybe 3 to 5, you don't want to overdo it. Overdoing it kind of really limits things. But if you start with like even 2 to 3, that's a pretty good starting place. If you say academics, all right, so let's say we want to stay in California and we want to study nursing. See if it'll let me type. It's not liking my typing. Hang on. Oh, come on. I'm going to scroll. So if we go down and we find N, look for nursing. Okay, one thing you'll notice is that it's going to have a lot of different options. Okay, same thing with like engineering or other items like that. So you'll have different specific majors. And so if we said, let's just say nursing education. We'll see how close that comes up. You might want to add maybe a couple more on there if you were finding different nursing, or if you wanted to add health or things like that. So like biomedical science as well. All right, so we'll do that. So it's got those two. This area here has information about, so when it's in this area, it's going to filter anything out that's not matching. If we're like, California is important but not a deal breaker, you can actually click the arrow and it's going to move it over here. What that says, it's going to like rank higher if it's in California, but it's not going to weed out schools if it's not. Okay, any of these things can be moved between the two. So think of this like it's an all or nothing thing. This is like, we'll just consider it, but it's not, necessarily the end of the world. All right, if you say admissions, if you say your GPA, and this is out of 4.0, so it's not weighted. So if we said like 3.7. Okay, we did that. So it's going to kind of roll down and it's going to say, okay, let's say in UC Riverside, all right, average GPA looks like about a 3.61, okay, and your GPA is above that. If you had SAT scores, they can do that. And you can actually pick out different things up here. So you said admissions info. All right, so it'll say acceptance rate 51%, app fee 70, kind of rough estimate of tuition and room and board. Again, this is before any type of aid, just in-state, okay. And you can see why this is a match. So you can see, okay, it's got biomedical sciences. It's located in California, so it's a match. Now, this is nice. It kind of gives us a list to explore, but if we want to kind of dive into more specific details, you want to click on it. You're going to hit Riverside, and it's going to pull up this window once it loads. And again, you're going to be able to dive more deeply into what other schools, okay, how do you compare against others who applied? Say if you said your weighted GPA, and you said it's like that range. If you're in a student's account, we upload GPAs semi-regularly, so if it's not quite up to date, it probably needs an update, but you can get a rough estimate, scores, things like that. So you can kind of get yourself compared when you have that. You can understand a little bit more about what majors they might offer. So if you're like, I don't know what majors UC Riverside offers, so let me kind of scroll through and you can kind of see it broken down by college. So engineering, here's all the engineering programs. All right. You can do a student life. Again, this is the stuff that makes people happy on campus. How big is it? How far away from home is it? Okay, different types of breakdown of ethnicity on campus. Admissions is probably the #1, and cost is probably the #2 tab that people look at. Okay, admissions, deadlines. It shows you, also this is key information about our school. Okay, so this will actually break down and show you details about where students who attended North Tahoe High School got in or not. Okay, and it breaks down, as we go through this year, unless people take the SAT or ACT, this graph on this side is going to be a little less reliable, but the GPA should still be accurate. Who gets in? I believe these students were waitlisted. All right, so you can kind of see GPA, test score maybe wise, where people are getting in or not. Okay, and these are North Tahoe High School students, so that goes a lot of, very different away from kind of where we look at maybe larger scale data. Okay, and it breaks down the overall cost. Okay, again, estimates, ballpark figures. All right. If we go, there was one other one. So this one, on the overview tab, if you're like, hey, I like Riverside, Riverside's on my list, but I'm kind of trying to explore some other options. This is also kind of cool. So this college overlaps area, I think it might open in a new window. Oh, there we go. It's going to work. Cool. What this does is it says from our historical data in Naviance, of the students who applied to Riverside, students also applied to the following schools. Many times, students who apply to certain institutions maybe have a similar kind of focus or areas of taste. All right, so you can get some data here as well. And this is, again, all of our students here at North Tahoe High School data. So how many students were accepted at any individual campus, what their average scores were, average GPAs, and so on. So good data points here. All right, and you can do this with any types of school. There's probably almost 4,000 schools in their database. So I would encourage you to do that. The other one that I want to kind of highlight is just showing you where some information is about college, about counseling and that kind of stuff that I mentioned on our website. So again, up here at the top, counseling support, you can look through all of this stuff. If you're curious about working with a college counselor, there's some advice that I've written there. Okay, but if you just click on this menu item, it's probably the best place to start. That junior workshop that I mentioned here. If you want to kind of get an idea about a FAFSA demo, it probably won't be too wildly different. It's not available, so don't start it now, but if you want to kind of get a preview, you can use that. But these links are all here. Okay, there's an application spreadsheet which I've shown students, which I talk about in this video as well. There is also a link to the senior profile. Some of these items are only available to the students when they're logged into their account. Okay, but it just provides a lot of things. Information about rankings, if you're curious about why that is. Reed College in Oregon wrote this up, and I just linked to it because it's pretty great. Okay, so if you want to understand why people don't like rankings and why it's not a good fit. Okay, but you can get a ton of details here. So I would encourage you to explore if you have the bandwidth to do that. Like I said, post-secondary plan meetings coming up here in the next couple of weeks. Lots of stuff coming your way. That's probably the biggest thing about this year is it can be very much information overload. I'm sorry for doing that to you today as well. Okay, but it is very, very crucial for us to really kind of jump into it and make sure that we are starting this process together. We are starting broadly, and we will get more specific as we go. Trust the process. Trust the systems. It's scary because all the media and experiences that people have had. However, it is something that I would, very few students have ever been disappointed. All right. Some people might not necessarily make it to their number one school, but we'll make sure that your student is okay. Okay. If they do their part, you guys do your part, we're going to do our part. And generally speaking, the college is also going to do their part. They're going to recognize the hard work. Okay. And as long as we do that well, and we do it wisely and diversely, we're going to get you to a very great place when you graduate. So thank you for hanging in there with me a little bit over our hour-long goal. Sometimes I'm long-winded, but thanks for hanging in there. If you guys have any questions, feel free to shoot me any emails as well. I'm happy to do that. Phone calls are a little bit tough just because I can't typically answer them. I'm in meetings out of the office, that kind of stuff. But emails are definitely preferred. And then students will be meeting here very, very shortly. Thank you for hanging in there, you guys, and have a wonderful, wonderful whatever part of the day that you're in when you're watching this. Cheers.